many parts of the country, primarily due to late reception of sensitive material. We had around 50 teams out and observing, and only 2 of them saw the polling stations opening on time. Positively, once polling station opened, ballots were cast in a peaceful atmosphere. Throughout the day, we saw long queues in 40% of polling stations observed. We also saw dedication from the side of poll workers who did their best to ensure that each and every one could cast their ballot. Many of the polling workers were young citizens. We also commend citizen observers. They deployed observers to all polling centers, which positively contributed to the transparency. And now about counting. In polling stations where poll workers knew all procedures they have to follow, counting was quick and efficient. However, we cannot overlook reports about intimidation and violence that marred the otherwise peaceful atmosphere in at least 6 districts. It has been confirmed that live ammunition was fired in Portoloco, Freetown, and Coinadugo. Even one such case would be one too much. It created insecurity and fear for voters and poll workers alike. And it is important to note, our observers directly saw violence and unrest inside 7 polling stations during voting and in 2 during the closing and counting. Unrest and turbulence were directly witnessed by the EU-EUM observers in tally centers in Portoloco, Freetown, and Makeni. Election observation is not a one-day event. To make an informed assessment of 2023 general elections, the EU-EUM started its work already in mid-May. Upon arrival, we saw that the ECSL appears to be operationally prepared to hold elections on time. Our observers saw training of temporary election staff, and it was overall positively assessed. However, procedures for tallying and results management came late. It clouded prospects of a transparent tabulation and results process. Thus, far in the tabulation process, it appears that those procedures are not always properly applied and not always the expected transparency in results management is achieved. And this brings me to one of the key issues observed during the weeks that the mission has been on the ground. The issue of transparency and timely and clear communication. Prior to the polls, the ECSL took positive measures to mitigate various shortcomings and missteps that occurred at various stages of elections.
You can be closer to the microphone, please.
Sorry, maybe you hear me a bit better now. Prior to the polls, the ECSL took positive measures to mitigate various shortcomings and missteps that occurred at various stages of elections. However, those efforts were eclipsed by insufficient transparency. As you all know, the political environment is highly polarized, and in such circumstances, lack of transparency is reducing the public confidence in the electoral process. So all things considered, we can say that the ECSL lacked clear, timely, and comprehensive communication with the broader public. It created uncertainties and reduced stakeholders' trust in the institution. The candidates' registration process was inclusive. We saw 13 candidates contesting the presidential race. 14 parties filed candidate list for parliamentary elections. In a positive development and following legal reforms, 32% of parliamentary candidates were women. However, we received reports that political parties were not accommodating this welcomed novelty and tried to circumventing the gender quota requirement. Regrettably, only 4 out of 63 parliamentary lists were led by a woman. It was also quite rare to see a woman as number 2 on the lists. And this indicated nothing more and nothing less, unfortunately, than a clear lack of political will. It is a right of each and every voter. It is a right of each and every voter to know their candidates, and this was not respected. Final list of candidates were published only a few days before elections. At least the presidential lists were made public well in advance. And now let us speak about how those candidates campaigned. Our observers observed more than 40 rallies in all 16 districts. The campaigns were engaging. At the start of the campaign, freedom of movement, assembly, and expression were largely respected. But then, closer to the election day, localized, politically motivated attacks by different actors happened in at least 6 districts of Sierra Leone. And we saw also, unfortunately, live ammunition being used by security forces at one of the main political parties' headquarters in Freetown. It left 1 person dead. And let me stress, elections are won through ballots, not bullets. Political violence, what we saw primarily in southeast of the country, shrank the space of political participation and hampered the level playing field. On a positive note, though, the new Electoral Act gave the Political Party Regulation Commission broader mandate, and on many occasions, the PPRC mediated political confrontations. However, seldom its sanctioning powers were applied to ensure a full compliance with campaign rules. Signing of the peace pledge by presidential candidates did not trickle down to the districts. Clearer, timelier, and more resolved actions against harmful practices would have helped to uphold an issue-based campaign discourse. With no caps on donations or expenditures, better-off candidates had a clear advantage in all races. The APC and SLPP were by far the biggest spenders, holding costly, large-scale rallies, dominating the outdoor advertising space and radio broadcasts. Digital ads were rarely used. Instead, the SLPP campaigned on official government websites and social media accounts, effectively blurring the line between governing and campaigning. Media plays a critical role during the election, and we commend those well-established broadcasters who offered a balanced coverage of campaign. Our observer observed political debates at various levels in all districts. Those discussions helped voters to compare lead contestants directly. Furthermore, there were debates exclusively among women candidates. Regrettable, however, the national presidential debate also planned did not take place. However, we also saw media poverty. And as a result of it, many community radio stations sold their prime time to parties or openly rallied either for the APC or SLPP. Such practices do not accord with the core principle of professional journalism and misled voters whose main source of news are local radios. During this campaign, social media affected also those who rarely use internet. Our social media monitoring unit recorded many aggressive and divisive messages that exploited ethno-regional sentiments and economic hardships. Such content was posted on political groups on Facebook and featured in comments on Twitter, creating insecurities for many voters